Hi, welcome. We're at the home of Mr. and Mrs. Walter McLeod. Some of the friends have gathered around the table and we're talking about Southern foods, the history of Southern foods, soul foods, whatever you would like to call it. Uh, we're having a little tea and cake and a couple of the recipes that we'll be talking about. So now I'll go over to the table and join everybody else.
Available, and people tend to eat and prepare food by what's available to them. As for instance, uh, the manimal or the four-legged creature that we're accustomed to eating in this particular hemisphere is beef, pork, veal, lamb, and some parts of this world these animals aren't cultivated or bred. Some parts of this world, these animals are revered. They're not eaten. Their flesh is not eaten or worshipped. The preparation of the food is like restricted to the diet. Some things are prevalent, some things are not prevalent. We're talking now about the preparation of soul food in this country. What is soul food? I think that there is no strict definition of soul food. Soul food is an ethnic type of a dish.
Example, when you talk about soul food, a lot of people think all black people eat the same foods, and that is not true. And even simple things, like we were mentioning before about rice, like in South Carolina, they have rice. Many people in South Carolina at every meal. And this is a dinner food, something they're starved for dinner.
Not necessarily.
Whereas people from
that
Georgia might eat rice as a cereal in the morning with milk and sugar.
Yeah, who determines that? Who determines
Well, this is just something that they did in their area, because now in your family they had rice on the stove all the time, and no matter what you had for dinner, you would have rice, macaroni, and potato salad. Now, with my parents coming from, and yams, don't leave those out, coming from Georgia, they would have one starch and a vegetable, sometimes just a vegetable and no meat. You know, they did things differently. So they were shocked to know that we ate rice with milk and sugar as a cereal, opposed to having rice with gravy. See, so even though you're black, you do things differently. And in Virginia, on my mother's side, they would have potatoes more so than the people from Georgia. They would cook a lot of potatoes. So it depends on what area that you're from and what you grew up with, because maybe the same food was there, but people prepared it differently.
That's a good example when you're talking about what's available. South Carolina, Georgia, and even parts of North Carolina, that was lowland country. The country was produced rice. It didn't grow potatoes because the earth could not produce the potato. It wasn't the right kind of a soil. You had a heavier soil in the north where you can grow potatoes. Rice, you grow rice in a swamp. And South Carolina was a swampy land. Part of northern Georgia and down in the Mississippi Valley was all swampy land, so rice was prevalent down there.
Right.
That's why people down that area ate more rice than they ate potatoes.
So the
Potatoes weren't there.
The geography speaks a lot for
Oh
what
yeah,
you're gonna eat.
people eat what's most abundant to them, as simple as that. And the preparation really depends upon the influence.
Yeah, like Jamaican.
Jamaica,
Rice is made so many different ways.
yeah, Jamaican food, like the food of this here continent, dependent upon the influence. In Jamaica, you had the Caribs down there, the Indians, or the native people,
Indians and
or the African, and also the English, and probably the French, because it was all down there, and all of that is included in what they call the Jamaican diet. It's all included.
Well, I guess, like, well, Mary, you said your family from Georgia,
Right.
which is getting closer to Texas. That's where I'm from.
Okay.
And like you said, it depends on what you have to offer. Now, rice was not a staple for us. Like, we had it prepared like you did for breakfast, right? But now our main starch was potatoes. And as we're talking, I'm beginning to think about it. I've never seen rice grown, but now that I think about it, it's grown in a marshy area, right? And in Texas, where I was, is the desert. Texas and New Mexico
Yeah.
is the desert and sand. And we had potatoes because you could grow those in the ground. And that was our staple. And we had the mashed potatoes, the fried potatoes. And not only was it different, we even pronounced them different. Here they said just potatoes or white potatoes. We said Irish potatoes.
Irish potatoes.
Yeah.
Yes,
Even
I
though
heard
we weren't that,
Yes.
we said Irish potatoes, really. We left the R completely out. But you were able to grow them. So you really depended on what you could harvest. That's why I'm familiar with more wild game, I guess, than the rest, because in the wintertime, my grandfather and others had to go hunting. Whatever they brought back, my grandparents prepared. That was rabbit, squirrel, bird, possum, fish, anything that they could gather. And that's what carried them through the winter month. So you
Talking
really
about
able to...
that, yesterday when I visited my sister, the man across the street from her, he saw this blackbird. And he was telling me about wherever he came from that they used to eat blackbirds. And he was saying, that's a nice big one. I would like to get a hold of him. And he was going on and on about the blackbird. And so I said, well, I never had a blackbird. So he sort of laughed. He said, well, where were you from? And then I just went in the house. But now, and then when I got in the house, my sister said, was he talking to you about those blackbirds? Because that took him back home. He remembered eating them.
I remember eating
Talk
sterlings.
about-
I remember eating sterlings.
Yeah.
Any kind of bird, that was a meat and to get you over in the winter.
Right.
Any kind, whatever you could harvest, that's what you ate.
Well, during slavery, some of the slaves had the opportunity to go out into the bush and catch and harvest and gather berries and nuts and wild game and whatever, because they weren't supplied that by the master. The slave was given the non-nutritional food, and the other
Like the
food.
hog maws.
And yes, what ties
The intros,
Yeah.
the stomach, the
Yeah.
intestines, the
Yeah.
feet, the tail,
Which
the
became a
head.
delicacy later
Which
on.
became, yeah, you can call it, yeah,
See, she wanted some background or origin on these foods. The origin was necessity. In other words, the black woman, the people, I guess, of low income or whatever, we just had to use our imagination and we could use anything.
And that's
So
when
you
make a
had to
meal.
make
And
it
make
to,
it tasty.
yeah, you had, for survival of your family, you had to use whatever. So that's why we charged with inventing the chitlins, because the master didn't want that. And it was leftover and she had to feed her family, so she used whatever and made it tasty.
And we perfected it.
Yes.
Yes.
Yes. Perfected that.
So it's
Yeah.
necessity is the origin of most
Speaking
this
of,
food.
you mentioned about the most widely used food is the chicken. There's so many ways to fix that chicken. You have
chicken and fish, chicken and seafood. Yeah.
Sick chicken and seafood. I know, like,
What's that? It's jerk chicken.
oh, Jamaica, you have
it's
jerk
Jamaica,
chicken.
Yes.
Yeah.
That's
That's dried chicken.
Other
Yes.
than just fried chicken.
Fried chicken.
No, I said that's dried chicken, jerk chicken.
It's a, it's,
Or is it
yeah.
with the
well,
ginger?
jerk chicken is a special seasoning. It's a jerk seasoning. And the fish, you also have jerk fish, by the way, but the chicken is prepared by seasoning the chicken a good day in advance before you cook it. And it's more or less a stew, so to speak, in the cooking, you know, with this jerk sauce. A combination of stew and roast, you know, it's, you know, many different ways of
You
fixing
cook it over the stove? Or
you cook it over the stove, and you can roast it. You can roast the chicken, but it's mainly how you season the food, how you prepare it.
Jerk chicken.
Jerk
is
chicken is-
hot.
is a-
So it's hot seasoning.
Well, it's mild
Oh, it's mild.
or hot.
Yes.
See,
And how about
it's
the-
probably preserved because back years ago,
Yeah.
you didn't have refrigeration, so you had to prepare it in a fashion that it would stay. Either you pickle it with vinegar and salt, or pepper, or you smoke it, you dried it out in the sun. Various ways
yeah.
of
I
saying
guess
it.
Well,
jerk would be, that's the best definition I heard. I guess jerk would be a way of saying you pickle it down, the food to be cooked. Because it tastes better when it's seasoned way in advance. And you can roast it also. There's many ways of preparing it, but most times it's roasted. You know, once it's been seasoned, highly seasoned overnight, let it saute in the seasoning.
Well, that's like the fish that Edna made, that,
Marilyn.
and Marie makes
Yeah.
it, Kat does that. They marinate it because we were down in Atlantic City, and my sister-in-law, who lives in Rochester, said that she was going to bring some fish down. Her friend was going to make it, who is from Jamaica. So I said, well, Walter, what kind of fish are they going to bring down here that far that's going to be any good?
That's what I thought.
But it was very good. But I guess it's what they have. They must have vinegar or something that keeps the
That's
fish, and it was
like
really
Yeah,
delicious.
that's
And-
scabeche fish.
Oh,
Scabeche,
okay, and it was
scabeche fish.
delicious, and Bobby's mother, Edna, she makes it too, and it's very
I guess
good.
everybody on there makes it.
Yeah, so,
Scabeche fish.
yeah,
Scabeche
so
is good.
that's another thing that you could keep that, and, because
Good
that's how he
days.
brought it down for the reunion. Yeah. But see, you
You
don't
know,
know,
you
you know.
A lot of southern foods are pickled or
Yeah.
fried.
Well, that's what we have
Yeah.
here, like
Yes.
the watermelon rind. I have a
Yes.
recipe from my grandmother, and what she would make, which Walter has made too. This is a jar of it here,
Yeah,
And
it's,
where they
it tastes
pickle
good.
the
Yeah, it tastes
watermelon
good.
rind, and we have a recipe here, and that's what she calls it, watermelon pickle. And she just takes the rind, and, well, Walter, do you remember how?
These are
There's a plate
brandied, these are brandied peaches.
Mm.
These are brandy old, this is very easy to make, by the way.
You made those walk?
Yeah, and he made the pickles too.
I made those.
There it is on the
Yeah.
plate there.
All you
Yeah.
need is sugar.
Oh, and here's some,
sugar and
here's,
fruit.
Yeah.
see, and it's very nice, and we serve this when you
No,
have
no,
greens,
this-
or you could
this
have
is
this with meat,
alcohol.
with pork or something,
That's all you need
and
is
it's
sugar
very
and fruit.
tasty.
A layer of
And
sugar, a layer
sometimes
of fruit,
when
a
you're
layer of
in
sugar, a layer
a
of fruit.
small shop, you will find a jar of watermelon rinds. Now, they're not as spicy as the ones that are homemade, but you can find these in stores too. Because when we go down to, what is the place we stop at going to English Town, to Atlantic City? The place that we have, Smithville Inn. They have jars of.
Why don't you give us a recipe on that?
water.
then? From
Well, I
start
have
to
the
finish.
recipe.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah,
I
let's
have
hear
it
it.
right here, yeah.
Let's hear it.
Now, some of
Because I
the,
ate that thing for a week. He made me some. First time I
I
ever
gave you
ate
some, I
pickle.
didn't make you some.
Okay, you gave
I
me.
gave
Yeah, right, you did. And I didn't think I would like it, but it took. I mean, that whole bottle went in about
Okay.
5 days. I ate
Walter,
that
do
thing.
you remember the spices that you put in here? I can't understand that too well.
What we need is an alum, I know we need alum, and
Vinegar, of course.
vinegar, and sugar. That's all we need, alum, vinegar, and sugar. And
And
What
it's
is-
a
what is
several
alum?
days, it's a week
it takes,
procedure.
it takes a, I forget, I think it takes 3 days to, for the process. I think it's 3 days for the process.
What is an alum?
Alum.
Alum is a mineral. Alum, the alum that we use for food preparation is different from the alum that is used medicinally. It's a mineral, it's a white powder.
And you had to send away for it, right? Did you send away?
I had to
the
send away to the
Spice
to
company?
the spice
in
company
McCormick?
because I couldn't find it on the shelf in the stores, even though it's listed in their list of spices. Most stores don't have them, don't have this
Because people
particular.
don't use it.
People don't use it. But it's,
I never heard of it
Me
myself.
either.
alum, yeah, alum. It's a white powder.
There's one that you hear mostly about from the drugstore.
Yeah, that's.
Right.
I would like to
Yeah.
draw something,
Yeah.
you know.
Because we didn't know if that's what they meant, you know,
I
and
bought
then in
that.
reading, he found
I
that,
bought
no,
that, and that
that's not
says for
it.
external use only. I said, well, I can't use this.
No.
Right.
So then I called up McCormick, and they did have the alum that they use for food preparation. So I bought the alum from them, and I went, you need gauze with this also for straining,
That's-
and also spice.
So that's another thing you have to be careful with the food, like the mushroom. There's one mushroom that's poisonous, and there's one that they serve as a delicacy. So they grew wild where I grew up, but I didn't know which one to pick, and my grandparents didn't either, so they didn't bother with mushroom.
Mhm.
Yeah, here I am up north, and that's a delicate, that's a big deal of mushroom.
Right, right. Mhm.
How about the sweet potato? You mentioned growing the white potato. Well, the sweet potato, from what I understand, originated in South America. And then you have the yam, which is a staple of Africa. And
We grew that also,
Yes.
along with your white potatoes, you grew your sweet
Sweet
potatoes,
potatoes,
and I
yeah.
remember harvesting them. Everything was abundant where I was except the rice, because rice have to be around water.
yeah,
Because
No.
where is rice, where is it nearest rice? Carolina,
Yeah,
because
South
that's,
Carolina, yeah, South
yeah, because
Carolina,
that's on the
Georgia,
coast, yeah.
Alabama, Louisiana, Texas.
You just mentioned sweet potato. Now, sometimes I get confused, I guess maybe because of my background, being Jamaican, but sweet potatoes and yam, isn't that the same thing?
No, a lot of us,
It's a slight
a
difference.
lot of people have gotten confused. They say it's probably because there are some similarities between the sweet potato and the yam. But the yam is African, was brought over from Africa. And during the time of slavery, they said they had served the sweet potato, and the slaves would refer to the yam, the sweet potato, as a yam, because they used the word yam, and probably an African word similar to an African word, N-Y-A-M, referring to the sweet potatoes and yam. So that's why they call sweet potato yam sometimes. Sometimes
That's
it's
so
called.
strange though, in Jamaica it's so different.
Yes,
back to
because the
location.
sweet potato's orange in color.
Yeah, you can
And
tell
And the
it.
yam is
Yeah.
white.
White.
Oh,
Well, in
yes.
Jamaica,
Yeah.
Jamaican sweet potato, which I have to say tastes better than the Americans, that's my partiality.
Yeah, go
But
ahead.
Jamaican sweet potato is white on the inside.
Okay.
That's
And
a
it's
yam.
real.
You
No,
call- you probably call it
no.
yam sweet
Jamaica
potato.
has different version of yam. Jamaica has
That's
about
right.
over a dozen variety of yam. The Jamaican yam is completely different than the American yam. You know, one of the most favorite yam in Jamaica is a thing called yellow yam, or there's a white yam. There's a St. Vincent yam. I mean, there are many different yams that I don't know the
And
name,
what,
and
you
they're
don't
not
know the
sweet.
difference.
But they only grow them
You know
in
the
Jamaica
difference.
though.
You know the difference. It's a taste. I think
Yes.
maybe Jamaica and the West Indies, Trinidad and so forth, but you can tell by the taste. And
Yes.
they taste similar to a potato. They, how can I say? They're tasteless, but yet they have their own distinct taste. And the yam in Jamaica is completely different than that in America.
And it wasn't until I came north that I heard that pronunciation yam.
And they're all
Always
roots.
sweet potatoes
They're
are
all
Yes.
roots.
Yes,
And they
they're
grow
all
underground.
roots.
They're huge,
Yes.
some of them.
And now you prepare the plantain, which is
Plantain
also
is just a,
African,
you can fix that many ways, just an oversized banana, so to
but
speak.
yes.
You can cook it green, or you can cook it well ripe, you know.
But you know, I think one of the reasons why the yam really developed, I guess the early colonists, they had to get a product that they could grow to help them sustain themselves. Just like they had to determine what particular crop would survive in a particular area, because all crops don't grow in the same area. Like they had sugar cane, and cotton, and rice, all products, but they all grown in different areas.
Yeah.
Now, at one time, one of the main sources of sugar was from the beet, and also from the yam. They got
Sugar cane.
because sugar cane, they couldn't grow it all over. They couldn't grow it all over. Like tobacco, they have all different types of tobacco. They have tobacco that grows in the south. They have tobacco that grows in the north. Different tobacco. You have potatoes that grow in the high climate, potatoes that grow in the low climate. Like potatoes that grow on Long Island are different than potatoes that grow up in Idaho. And potatoes that grow in North, they're potatoes, but they're different potatoes. And the same thing with the beet, with the yam.
Yeah.
The yam, you got to have more uses of the yam other than baking it. You know, that's not the primary.
Cones in there,
That's
so
not
I
the
guess
primary.
that's a pudding or something, or bread that they made out of
But
the
that's not the
yam.
primary. That's not the primary purpose of the yam. The primary purpose of the yam was to extract whatever the yam provided for it, and that was the syrup or either the sugar.
Okay.
So then it became a side dish.
It became a byproduct of it.
Yeah,
Became a
yeah.
byproduct of it.
So it had many uses then.
Oh yeah.
Now, yes.
What about some of the main
Yes,
courses
canned
then? Now that we didn't
yams.
cover the
Yeah,
side dishes,
yes.
the rice, not to mention kalalu,
Now,
which is
what's
a
that?
kalalu.
Is that like collard
Kalalu
greens
is like
or-
collard greens.
Yeah.
It's
But
if it
he
tastes
said better,
because
right?
it's
They
Jamaican.
stole it from us.
Yeah, man, no, it's a completely different taste
So
than
how do you prepare
vegetable.
it?
Color, completely different tasting.
How do you
It's more or
prepare it?
less steamed. You wash it, of course, and
You put the
on
ham
each
on
color you can, but primarily Jamaicans may use a little salt pork for seasoning, some saltfish. It's up to your taste of the individual. But you would prepare it by, there's a thin layer of skin on the vines, and you just peel that off, and then you would cut them in, like, you more or less dice them.
That growing a tree?
Same as a collard green, the same size as a collard green, the same exact
Well, can
thing.
you buy it here,
Leaf.
like in certain
Yeah, you can.
areas?
Yeah, oh yeah,
Okay.
definitely. Like, for example, where I'm, area I live in East Orange, abundance of Jamaicans, so I do find that wherever there's a ethnic group living, you're definitely going to find their
Yeah,
food.
Ethnic food, yes. They're
Definitely
coming out
food.
here now. There's an ethnic food store.
I know New Brunswick has a large West Indian population.
Yes.
They
But,
have
yeah.
one for the Indians
But
on.
And
Callaloo
George,
is
you
really
remember
tasty. I
when we
recommend
were
to
over
everyone
there
Callaloo.
on,
It's a side dish or
Mulberry.
vegetable
I
as
have
well as
tasted
it could be a main dish.
Callaloo.
Depends on how you
Yes.
fix it. Yeah.
Yes, it tastes
I guess
good.
I just answered my own question. I looked up the word yam and sweet potato, and it says yam, a staple found in tropical areas. Again, I say Texas and New Mexico. I was on the desert. That's why a lot of these things I wasn't familiar with. Rice.
Yes.
But here you only
Okay,
have
but
one
you
yam.
said
You only
you
have one
didn't,
yam. Where in Jamaica you have
We had
many
sweet
yams.
potatoes.
Okay, you didn't call it yam in your area, you just called it sweet potato.
Because I was wondering what's the difference. No, because the
So
yam
we
is
make
a
it
staple
very big
found in
bowl,
tropical
one thing.
But it's
areas.
different.
Okay.
Different.
Now,
Believe
we
me, you
really
can tell
had
the
sweet
difference.
potatoes. That's
The
all.
yellow yam is very yellow.
I never heard
And-
yam
You
until I
see
came
that
here.
in the
Nice
food
thing.
service.
No,
Sometimes.
it's
And
really
we-
hard.
It's caught
What do
up.
you mean by staple?
We can't
Staple means that it's,
Well, you
it's
made
an
this-
abundant. It's an abundant, that's what it's a staple. We have this you can have it every day because they get the most of it.
Which yam is a staple of
It's a staple.
Africa.
Well, it is a staple.
In a tropical
Like-
area.
like-
And that's
Yeah.
why, yeah,
Yeah.
And that's why you said sweet potatoes,
way
because that's
back,
what it
you know,
was.
the sweet
Right.
That's
potato
what it was
and the
back
yam
then.
Yeah.
fusion.
Yeah. How about
From
some
that-
main dishes? Why don't you give the recipe on a main dish? From fish to pork to veal to beef
Oh,
to chicken.
how about the fish that you were talking about?
Well, everybody's favorite meal, the fish.
The
Yeah,
crayfish,
yeah.
when I was the crawfish, we found that in this book also. Exactly what I was talking about, crawdad
Yeah,
tales, how to
yeah.
find it. This book was written by a young lady, well, it was written, it says here in Oklahoma City, but I noticed that she was from Texas also. So a lot of these recipes in here I am familiar with.
That's
And,
southwestern United
I was
States.
doing west,
Yeah,
yes.
that would be Spanish influence.
And I found out the crayfish and the crawfish, that we used to go down to the crawfish hole to catch right after it would rain, is a relative of the lobster now. That is, you know, they're so expensive now. We used to go down and just catch these with a stick out of a hole because when it rained, the water didn't stay long. It would dry up. And as the water would go away, the crawfish would dig down a little farther, digging a hole. And we would take a stick and go around and pull the crawfish out. He was fighting back. We would pull him out and take him home. And my grandmother would fry the tails of that.
Oh, you fried it.
They told us it rained crawfish.
Rain, oh, yeah. We go to the river down in Jamaica, pick them under the rocks, pick them up.
And they were trying to hide.
Yeah,
Even where
man.
they could hide. So I guess they were trying to hide.
A popular southern dish with fish is the fish and grits.
Fish and grits.
That's
Oh,
what
yeah.
In the morning.
I love that for breakfast, yeah, man.
Yes.
Yeah, that's what
Yeah.
Michael had when he was in school, they had fish
But
and
you
grits.
gotta try some steamed fish, stew fish, roast fish.
Walter's
Yeah,
wedding.
man.
Tell them about your father's store and what you cooked over there.
Yeah,
It's the same, it's basically the same thing.
And did you have integrated greens there? Like little collard greens and carrots
Oh, yeah,
and
yeah.
stuff or something? That's what Helene
Integrated.
calls integrated greens, when you mix your greens, yeah. Adrian
I'm
does that
still
too,
trying to
right?
figure out soul food and ethnic. I guess it would be ethnic food because most of our food, really, especially our vegetables, came over through the African people. Like I was telling you earlier about some of the women had the foresight to know that they would be hungry. Now it is written, I'll have to get the documentation on this, that they brought a lot of seeds over in their hair.
Oh,
The
yeah.
type of
Okra
seeds.
seeds, yes.
Okra seeds.
Okras came from
That
Africa.
was
and
one,
Yes,
they had
okra.
others too,
okra
though. What
did
are
come
the
from
other
that.
Now the
ones?
book said watermelon, but at the presentation I heard they credit them for bringing the okra seeds over in their hair because they knew that they would get hungry.
Also,
Now,
too,
that was
one
smart.
thing that we forgot to mention, and it's a fact, the British, that little tiny island, that colonized the entire planet Earth at one time did transfer a lot of food from different parts of the world to another part. Like, for example, if you go to Sri Lanka, which is the southern tip of India, you would almost think you're in the West Indies. It look alike, the climate is the same, and as a result, the food in many areas are the same, like the mangoes and some of the coconut. And the British travel and transport a lot of roots and seeds from one part of the country or the world to another.
Because the original food over here was corn, and then they sent some of the corn back overseas.
That's why Jamaica, for example, curry goat, or curry goat as they might say, it's an Indian dish as well as a Jamaican dish, as well as a Trinidadian dish.
Trade,
And as a result of, I believe, the British.
They traded off food like everything else. Like we trade recipes,
Oh, yeah.
they traded off the
Indian,
food.
Chinese, yeah, man.
Yaman.
Yaman.
It's interesting in this book from the National Council of Negro Women, there's some recipes that the members put in the book, and it's interesting about the slave trade. In the back of the book, I was reading some of the foods that were brought over from Africa, and as you mentioned, the watermelon seed, say the sesame seeds, cowpeas, or black-eyed peas, as they call it, okra and watermelon
And probably
seeds
gungo peas.
were originally brought to North America from Africa.
Yeah, and gungo peas. Now, I've never heard this word mentioned much here in America. Gungo peas is really tasty with rice.
The unwanted things, such as chitlins, they threw them out to the slaves. But the slaves, being clever, what they would do, they would just cut them up, fry them, and that made a meal for them. That was survival. And then later, chitlins became a delicacy, and they added garlic and hog maws, hot peppers, vinegar, salt, pepper, red pepper, and hot sauce. So through the years, we learned to survive, but that was not the intent. The intent was just to throw something out to us to give us scraps.
And they thought it was leftovers because hog maws are really the pig's stomach and chitlins are the intestines.
Exactly. But we learned to survive.
And you would never think of eating anybody inside of anything, but we did. We survived.
That's right. The people will survive with what they have. You make a way.
Necessity
And
is the
that's what
mother of
we've done.
invention.
Exactly.
Yeah.